Welcome to Faithful, the podcast where we explore the intersection of leadership, faith, and impact. I'm your host, Christopher Swing, President and CEO of Vantage Surgical Solutions. Through thoughtful conversations with business leaders, missionaries, and changemakers, we uncover the principles that guide their work and connect them to timeless wisdom. In Season 1, we're diving into the foundational organizations and experiences that shape my own leadership journey. Whether you're a leader in business, faith, or your community, this conversation is packed with inspiration and practical wisdom. Thank you for joining me on this journey of discovering how faith and leadership intersect in meaningful ways. Let's dive into the episode. Hello and welcome back to Faithful. My name is Christopher Swing. I'm here today with Kory Culp. Kory is the CEO of Clearwater Service Corporation, of which I've been a board member since 2008. He joined in 2019 and became the GM in 2022. Subsequently, the CEO in 2023. He's a Master Sergeant in the Air National Guard, a husband and a father to two great kids. Kory has been a blessing to Clearwater. Under his leadership, we've acquired 3 water distribution networks and added new raw water capacity. We're currently investing in significant water main extension project, and we're doing some long-range planning. Well, we're doing the beginning of long-range planning. Thanks to Kory's leadership, we are doing long-range planning.
Appreciate it, Chris. I'm glad to be here.
So, Kory, what led you to join Clearwater Service Corporation in 2019?
Coming to Clearwater was kind of by luck, honestly. If you back up one more year from that, in 2018, I was just coming home from a deployment overseas. I had just gotten married. My wife and I were building our house and expecting our first kid, working as a water operator for the city and really not happy with the position that I was in. And talking with colleagues in the water industry, it got back to the sitting general manager at the time of Clearwater, and he just stopped by my house one day and wanted to have a conversation to see why I was getting out of the industry. And through that conversation, we kind of figured out that he did not have a proper exit plan for his retirement, and he was really looking for somebody to follow in his footsteps. And the rest was history after that. About 6 months later, I joined the team and hit the ground running.
What leadership qualities have been most essential in your transition from the general manager of the organization to the CEO?
Being a CEO versus general manager is really just going from worried about the day-to-day operations to looking at where the organization needs to go and the vision that the management team and the board has for the organization, and then facilitating us getting there. So really walking away from the day-to-day, I had to have that trust in the people that I put into power into running the day-to-day. That way I didn't have to worry about it, and that way I can move forward into looking into the future. I think the most important thing was the culture that we built prior to that. I think a good leader brings the culture of an organization, and that is where the foundation of a organization is made. So really coming in as a young leader, I had to gain not only the trust, but the respect of my employees and my counterparts. Not only that I'm going to do my job and that they can trust that, but when I do make a decision or when I'm looking at where the company is going, that they can trust that I'm already thought about them and what's best for them and the members of the corporation. Having that foundational trust really let me move from day-to-day operations to build the future of the corporation. I made it pretty seamless.
What do you think was the most difficult part of that transition from a GM role to a CEO?
Again, going back to that culture, the employees didn't see me day to day the way that they did before. And I really had to drive home the understanding that even though that I'm not here and you don't see me, you don't see what I'm doing day to day, I'm still here working and I'm working on your behalf. And really, as we progressed through that, the employees started to understand that and really got them excited about where the company was going, because they felt like they had a voice of where the company not only has been, but where it's going that they never had before.
Yeah, I think from a board perspective, it was a difficult transition for us as well, because it was kind of the transition of the decision process, right, from the board to you as the leader. And it was necessary because, as many people that have sat on boards in the past know, we're not in a position to know what's actually going on the day-to-day. But yeah, we were being tasked with making decisions primarily about things we really knew nothing about. And so when Kory came to the organization and not only showed the capacity and the willingness to lead, but also the capabilities to be an effective leader, it became really obvious to me, and I think many of the board members, that we needed to make the transition in order to make the organization more effective and really to level up the organization and enable it to be a self-sustaining entity in which it really hadn't been in the past. And so, kudos to you. I really enjoy seeing you continue to grow, and every year, the organization gets better, the information gets better, and just the connectivity of the team seems to improve. So, since becoming the CEO of Clearwater, we've expanded significantly. What is your approach to growth and to long-range planning?
Yeah, looking at it, in 3 years, we've grown over 30%. And just to put that in perspective, we didn't do 30% growth in the 15 years prior to that. So we're talking about growth that the company has not seen ever before, and we really didn't know how to handle it. But I think that goes back to the culture that not only myself, but the other managers in the organization have worked so hard to create. We are very open with every employee, from myself down to the guy that's reading meters or doing locates. They know what our goals are. They understand it. And through the culture of us having their trust and them understanding that we have their buy-in to where they're excited. They don't see this growth as a negative thing of, I'm going to have more work to do, or what does that add on to me? They see it as an opportunity to expand not only the company, but themselves. And really building that culture and getting everybody on board has created this infectious culture.
So, none of us are utility operators. And to be honest, I'm sure thankful that you guys are out there, but probably none of the listeners are. Most of them are entrepreneurs or senior leaders of organizations. And so help us to understand some of the challenges that you've faced with your growth. We've all experienced growth in different ways, whether it be organic growth or acquisition growth, and had to overcome some of those challenges of culture, etc. But I think one of the unique things about Clearwater is we were positioned for growth. We just didn't have a desire for growth before you came into the organization. And to be honest, if we didn't have growth, the impact to the organization from a rate perspective would have been even more significant than what it already has been. And so help us as non-operators, non-utility workers, what are some of the struggles that you've encountered while increasing our distribution and also building your water main extension or your raw water capacity?
Yeah, so water is the only utility that comes into your house through a line that you ingest into your body. And we take that pretty seriously. And so does the EPA and the state and federal governments. And a lot of those measures that are put into place help us, but they also tend to hinder us and drive up prices. We look at all the new regulations that come out. Well, all those regulations come out do nothing but drive up costs because they're mandated. When you start looking at all these small companies and, your small village water source, whether they get their water from another company or they are making it themselves or however they're getting it, they're following the same standard. So when we look at making water ourselves and then selling it wholesale to another entity, there's a lot of redundancy on testing just because that's the way it was built into the system. So some of the hurdles that we've seen is trying to get the end user to understand, and the members and the hopeful new members, that we're not out there trying to monopolize it. We're really trying to lower the overall cost for the end user. And we can do that by cutting out some of the the red tape of having to do things twice or having to test things twice. And, it's simple business on scale. The more we grow, the cheaper we can do things. So trying to relay that in a manner that, the voting member in a small town in central Illinois can understand and get behind hasn't always been the easiest thing.
So I think that's why we've aligned so well from board to CEO and vice versa, is that vision that you have to not grow just for the purpose of growing, but to truly grow for the purposes of maintaining our costs or reducing our costs. And it's very interesting to think about the fact that that's the only utility that we receive where we actually ingest it. And it is, I think everybody who is a Clearwater member appreciates the fact that you guys have that focus and that you're really concerned about making sure not only to deliver amazing tasting water, which you've done consistently over the years, but also to meet and exceed all the regulations. And we've seen the pains that come along with some of those regulations. Those of us who had to answer the questionnaire lately about, what's in our water pipes, like any of us really know what's in our water pipes. As you think about the continued growth, and mainly what comes to mind is kind of the water main extension or maybe even the raw water project that you're working on. What excites you about that? And kind of how does that position you to kind of level up the organization again here in the near term?
Yeah, when I look at the future and where we're going, I always want to take a tactical pause and look at, all right, where did we come from and what are the things that we want to stay consistent in the organization moving forward? Clearwater was founded on the idea that we were there to bring safe, clean drinking water to the rural community. And we're still doing that. We're just doing it at a larger scale, and our community is widening. But we have to stay true to our roots when we do that. And we do that by operating efficiently, ethically, and morally. And that's really the grassroots of the organization of when we move forward, does this align with who we are as an organization? Morally, is this right? And ethically, is this right? And those are really the pillars of when we make a decision, that's what we base it off of. So, I look at the extension project we're doing. And for your listeners, we basically acquired a water district that had a water treatment plant that was past its prime to the point where it was going to take more capital to get it to the standards it needs to be at than they could afford. So we stepped in and kind of took over at that point with the promise that we would bring them water from our water plant. It's about a 9-mile journey up to them. And I'd be remiss if I said I wasn't excited about the potential growth after that or the doors that it opens up in the areas. But really what gets me excited is being able to update those people on how close we are and hearing the stories about how excited the people are to be able to take out their in-home water filter system that they have to use because the water that they're getting right now, leaves stains in their showers or is way too hard. So I'm super excited for our members to really get that basic need of water met on a large scale.
Faithful is proudly sponsored by Vantage Surgical Solutions, where excellence meets innovation in advanced healthcare solutions. With a foundation built on integrity, creativity, and commitment, Vantage empowers leaders to shape the future, just as we explore leadership through faith on the podcast. Vantage Surgical Solutions, standing for excellence, leading advanced healthcare solutions. So I want to change gears a little bit. And, Kory's a busy guy. He's a CEO. He's a master sergeant in the Air National Guard. He's a husband and a father. And that group of things together doesn't come without its challenges. Now, granted, I believe, and you can correct me if I'm wrong here, but I believe since you became the CEO, you haven't been deployed, though that is always a risk. How do you balance all of this? Those are larger responsibilities in and of themselves. And how do you balance everybody has needs. And so give us some idea of, how you deal with all of those different responsibilities.
Yeah, I I do juggle a lot. I do all those things, and I sit on multiple boards just like you. And one thing that I always try to remember is give my all to what's in front of me right now. When I'm doing stuff with the military, I try to focus my full strength there. When I'm working for Clearwater, I try to do that. But then I also try to integrate them to bring things from either one to help me in my day to day. So whether that's experiences or connections, I try to have them work with each other. But I never let them hinder the next one. So I don't ever want to get into a position where my military career is hindering Clearwater or vice versa. And, the moment that happens, I'm going to reevaluate what's on my plate and how much I can handle. As a father, I try to immerse my kids into both cultures and to both jobs because they are two totally separate worlds that a lot of kids don't get to look into both of them. So my kids are just as comfortable running in the front doors of Clearwater and understanding what we do there and the impact we have on our community as they do of going to Peoria and running through the doors of our squadron up there and understanding the mission that we do and how that plays a role in the world. So I as a father, I try to use them as teaching tools, and in my respective areas in both of them, I really try to use those as tools in my bag.
So give us some idea of what values are important to you and how do you instill those values within your organizations, whether that be Clearwater, the Air National Guard, your family, whatever. For those of you who have listened as of late, I think Matthew Porter challenges all pretty hardcore to not just operate under values in our businesses, but that we take them home. And so I'd just be intrigued to understand from your perspective, like how you instill those within the organizations you operate in.
Yeah. So the values that I have are embedded into the culture that I create. I've heard you talk about it on your podcast and ask the question about is the people you work with, is that a family? And to me, it is 100% a family, and we treat it as such. Our employees know that they come first along with the members. I've never had an employee have to worry about, I had this happen at home, is work going to let me off? That's the last thing they should have to worry about. So I try to really instill those family values into the organization to where my employees don't have to worry about all the other things that are going on in work when they're at work. And they don't have to worry about whether their employer is going to have their back when those days do come. And I take that back and show my kids of, as they grow up of, hey, this is what you should expect. And this is the standards, that not only should you hold yourself, but you should hold those around you too.
Yeah, I love that. And I also I've seen you interact with your spouse, and I know that you guys do great together in parenting your kids. And I hope that they also your kids recognize what you do for your wife is what they should expect to either do for their spouse as they get older or expect from their spouse as they get older. And I think there's, a lot to be taken from that perspective. And I also see how you interact with our staff. And it is important that the staff understands that they're first as a human and then they're an employee. And for all of us who care about leadership, like if you can't acknowledge that first they're a human and then they're your employee, then you're going to struggle to be able to really build a team that's going to get you the level of productivity and effectiveness that you want. But I can tell you that when people, and this gets back to that argument, and I take it for what it is, but I firmly believe that there's a strong correlation with people who first feel valued as a person and then secondarily feel valued as an employee. They perform at a level that's unlike the average person does. And if you're not explicit with them to let them know that, then you'll have to wait for them to experience it. And so I always encourage people, yes, you have to act when those situations arise where you need to acknowledge them as a human first, but don't wait for those opportunities to get them to understand that they're important to you for who they are first as a human, because they will trust you. If they trust you in general, they'll trust you at your word. They'll act in a way that is at another level comparatively to if they didn't realize that in the past. So I'll be remiss. I know that you're a man of faith and your family has faith. Now I don't want to go too far down this rabbit hole, but are there any particular places, either biblically or within our faith, that have guided you in your leadership? And I know that none of us use our faith to either significantly change how we act or necessarily how we lead our teams, but you can't take the faith out of the person. And this is kind of where this whole idea of faithful came from. It's no matter what you say, no matter what you do, even if you listen to my interview with Jake Gatrell, which is an amazing leader at Eastern Illinois University, where he has a diverse group of individuals of every faith and probably without faith. No matter what he does, you still can't strip that out of who you are. And I think just being cognizant of the fact that you have it and how you are affected by it is important, not because I want you to be able to strip that from your leadership. I actually want you to maybe be willing to talk about where it comes from. What are your thoughts when I ask, are there any biblical principles, for instance, that have guided you in your leadership as you are today?
Yeah, when I look at faith and what it means to me, or our corporation, or my family, I see it as kind of the beacon and our moral compass. When I do something, whether it's as a father or as a CEO or as a board member or any of the other hats that I wear, I like to take a step back and you measure it up to that compass. And are they pointing in the right direction? Are they pointing in moral, ethical directions that are bettering not only myself, my community, the organization that I'm working on behalf of, or my kids in the future? So I use it as a moral compass in just about any aspect of my life. And I see my kids do it also. My daughter and my son, as you know, go to school at your church. And my daughter comes home all the time. And, the other night she was singing the Pledge of Allegiance, and then she went into the Pledge of Christianity. And, we sit around for a family that doesn't attend church every Sunday. Every night when we sit down for dinner, we hold hands and we say a prayer, and that came from my daughter. So I see faith as a teacher in many ways, but it also really guides me in how I act.
So this question is a little bit loaded, and I think it's important that we take the perspective that you're a relatively young leader, because you are. You definitely have the blessing of time on your side. For anyone who can see the video, I've got the gray hair everywhere. You've got this nice pelt of brown hair still, which indicates that you maybe haven't been run over as many times as I have. But have there been moments, in your career where you either had to use faith to rely on, or maybe that it's come into a difficult decision, and maybe it's back to what you were saying just a minute ago, and that is, that recognition that maybe we're getting into some of that gray stuff where nobody really wants to operate. And really, for those of us who are leaders of organizations, the biggest risk is not that you would step over the line, right? Or that you would make a decision that wasn't ethical or wasn't moral. The biggest risk is that people see your decision and they believe that it wasn't ethical or that it wasn't moral. And I think that's where it's really difficult for us, which is why, contrary to my good friend Matthew Porter, which I hope you're listening to this, buddy, because I'm just going to tell you that one of my core values is integrity. Even though you said that you can't stand organizations that do that, and I understand what you're saying, but for our organization, I want that front and center. And yes, I have an elevated expectation of integrity than the normal person, and my statement isn't so that way I'll keep the integrity, but it's so that way I don't make a decision where someone could perceive that I don't have the integrity. Because if you say that that's important to you, then you can't even get close to the line. And I think that's part of, sometimes that can be looked at as faith or it can be looked at as a value, but that's a long way of asking, have there been any moments in your career which you either had to rely on faith to make a difficult decision or to recover from, a situation that's happened?
Yeah. Going back to when you talked about integrity, I actually listened to your podcast on that, driving up to Peoria to do some time with the Guard. And we had a deep discussion with some of the key leaders in my organization about integrity, because that's actually one of our core values in the Air Force is integrity first. And, we had a deep conversation about really not only what it meant to us, but, what was Matthew talking about when he did say that. But going back to your question about, where faith has come into hard decisions. When I look at how I ended up at Clearwater, I never saw a job posting. I didn't go seeking it out. It came down to a man heard that I was leaving my job and stopped by my house. And luckily I was home and answered the door and we had a conversation. So for all those things to fall into place and to land me where I am today, I don't think you can call that a coincidence. Call it divine intervention, call it what you want. But it's things like that put you in the places that you are, that catapults you on the trajectory of your life, that I think you would be remiss into thinking that just happened just because.
Wow, that was deep. That's a great answer. So let's dig into that a little bit and tell me, when you joined Clearwater, and this is coming from a board position, right? So a lot of those decisions that were happening behind the scenes, and I give Dean a lot of credit really for finding you and to bringing you into the organization, because I've enjoyed your company, I've enjoyed your leadership, and I've seen the growth that has taken place since you joined us, and it's nothing short of a miracle. Not that you weren't capable of being that, but that everything aligned just like you just said. So we weren't searching for the GM role necessarily. We weren't, to be honest, we hadn't really gone through any thought of what are we going to do when Dean retires. All of us knew that was coming, shame on us, but there was not a lot of thought there and not a lot of concern. So what did you think you were getting yourself into when you joined Clearwater? How in the heck does some young buck go from being like an operator, right? I mean, you were Class A, right? So it's not like you didn't have a ton of value. You had a ton of value for us. But granted, we weren't really looking for a Class A water operator. We had one of those, other than just divine intervention. Like, how do you explain and kind of like, what was your logic when you came into Clearwater? What did you think you were coming into? And then how the heck did we end up here? And wow, what an amazing transition, over not really that long of a period of time. I mean, we're talking like 3 or 4 years. You went from being, this guy that we were bringing in to help support Dean and potentially being his transition point to subsequently making you the CEO, promoting Kristen into a CFO role, like just a ton of change. And, how did that come to be? Like, what's your take on all of that?
Yeah, honestly, when I came to Clearwater, I thought it was going to be a stepping stone. I didn't see myself with a career there. Honestly, I was applying to be a police officer and I wanted to go do that, but my wife was dead set on me finding something that I would be home every night. Monday through Friday days working with a baby on the way is kind of what led me to Clearwater. As I got there, things, as you know, were really old school. And I don't want that to sound badly, but the company had one email for the entire corporation when I got there. There was not a whole lot of growth. Dean did a great job in building what he built because he was there for 30 years and he built it into the corporation it was. So I don't want to take away from that. But in his later years, he kind of sat back and saw what he built and slowed down on the growth. As Dean worked his way out through his retirement plan, and it wasn't just a one day he was gone. It was about a year's process of me becoming the assistant general manager and really taking over the day-to-days and using him as a sounding board for a lot of things. I saw that as my ability to build the corporation into what I wanted it to. I had these grand thoughts in my head, and in conversations with you, you really sat me back and said, think of your 3, 5, 7, 15, what's your career goals? What's this? What's that? And in that first year, really we didn't accomplish a lot because we kept falling on our faces. And it wasn't until I took a step back and said, okay, why aren't we getting where we're going? Like I'm putting these things into place. Like, why isn't it working? And a light bulb went off in my head. It's the culture. Let's build a culture. Let's worry about the culture first and then worry about everything else. And that first year, we changed little things like the work schedule. We changed the insurance carrier that we used because most of our employees used a small town doctor's office instead of the big hospital. We made the little changes that made the employees happy to be there, gave them more than a job, created a career for them. And then through that, I got their trust, I got their buy-in. And then we started down the trajectory of making Clearwater what it is today. And that's what got everybody excited, because now that their basic needs were met of, okay, I know Clearwater has my back when it comes to pay, pension, all the other stuff. Now let's worry about the task at hand and see where we can take this thing. So really it was the pivot point, and that's the big thing that, through all of this that sticks in my head. It's not one transaction. It's not one acquisition. It wasn't one decision that we made. It was, we made a conscious effort to change the culture of the organization, and we pivoted with that.
Faithful is proudly sponsored by Vantage Surgical Solutions, where excellence meets innovation in advanced healthcare solutions. With a foundation built on integrity, creativity, and commitment, Vantage empowers leaders to shape the future, just as we explore leadership through faith on the podcast. Vantage Surgical Solutions, standing for excellence, leading advanced healthcare solutions. Yeah, I think all those things are true. And did you ever have any idea, like when you started all this, where you're going? And if you could do it all over again, would you change anything? And I'm just going to keep layering some questions on here so we can break them up in a minute. And then subsequently, how you handled yourself was at a level that I don't know where you got it from, because I know you didn't have a ton of these experiences, but it must have come from the military or something, because you just had the ability to stay cool, calm, and collected when 99% of the world would have been like, just tell me what the hell is going on and how this is going to work. And, I go back to, and I'll give a shout out here. My very first intern at Vantage, his name was Justin Stock, and I have a great relationship with his dad still. He's the president of the market for Midland States Bank, also my banker. And, I remember I sat him down and I said, okay, here's the deal, Justin. I need you to build out this amazing expense system. And I know you know nothing about expense systems. And I need you to use this company, which I've already signed a contract for. And I know you know nothing about them. But I need you to yourself gather the information to be able to aggregate the information in a way that is meaningful for us as an organization. And you've never worked for us in the past. There are very few people that can stand up in those situations, and you're the second one that I've really had that level of, hey, I don't have the ability or the capacity to do this. I can help you. You can call me anytime. You can text me anytime. You can come see me anytime. But where do you think that came from within you? Maybe coupled onto that, because I haven't asked enough questions. Like, what advice would you give to the next guy that is 20-something, right? So just to give you some perspective, that's two of us, over significant responsibilities in their late 20s, and that's not very common. So what do you think prepared you for that? What advice would you give to the next generation? And looking back, what do you wish you knew when you started that you know now, and what would you have done differently?
Well, for one, I appreciate the kind words. To go back to where you started, would I have done it again or all that? Once I decided that, Clearwater was my home and that's what I was doing, I dove into it so wholeheartedly, and it really it took over my entire life. I was working night and day, whether it was actually working or trying to understand what I didn't know. And really what helped me through all of it was conversations with people like you, having mentors that asked really deep questions of me. These weren't phone calls that I told you, hey, this is my problem, and you said, hey, go here and do that, and boom, you're fixed. It was sort of, hey, what do you think? Why do you think that? Did you think of it this way? And really, it's those long phone calls, and I'm sure annoying to you at times because I was calling you so often, that really retrained how I thought about things. And that really helped push me to where I was making pretty sound decisions at a young age. I add on top of that, I look at role models. I've had great role models everywhere I go. From my parents to my grandparents, in the military, I have one, Chief Master Sergeant Zachary Tari, Deputy Regional Director for the Federal Protective Services, and was my first supervisor there. And he always told me, and he still tells me this today, be undeniable. If you're going to do something and you're going to put yourself through it, be undeniably the right answer. When you couple that mindset with, okay, what I'm doing is I'm going to do it morally, ethically, and I'm going to do it ferociously. It's kind of hard to not be infectious with that and to move the organization forward. I like to put a lot of the credit on the people around me, because without the team I built, I couldn't have done it. I think that's a testament of Clearwater and the culture we had, because as you know, is we were not holding people there for a while based off of what we were paying them monetarily. They were bought in to the idea that we were throwing out. And through those, turbulent years, I think that's what kept our core team moving, is the understanding of what could be. For advice for emerging leaders of my age, don't get caught up in that imposter mindset of, hey, I don't have a seat at this table. Because I did see that, I kind of felt like people looked at me and then they wondered who brought their kid to work today. Some people would treat me like that. I'd walk onto job sites and I'd have, we had a foreman at the time that was old enough to be my grandpa, and everybody would go to him to, for questions. And, that was fine. But I learned to get past that, really quick of, okay, show how valuable you are, show what you bring to the table, and the rest is going to fall into place. And then I don't think you have to have everything figured out at a young age. 6 years ago, when I started working for Clearwater, I had not planned on being the CEO. I had not planned on really anything in between that besides provide for my family while I figured things out. And faith and divine intervention and everything else has led me to be sitting here today and the corporation to where it is. So don't think that you need to have it all figured out at a young age, but whatever you're doing, really, really pour your heart into it and give it your all.
Yeah, I think one of the things, that I think back over the time frame in your conversions to Clearwater, just your unassuming nature, your desire to be effective at whatever it is that you're doing, and your willingness to say, if this isn't what you're looking for, that's fine. Just tell me and we'll change gears. And I think it enabled you to come across as much more experienced than maybe what you were at the time. And it allowed you to grow, but not as we wanted you to grow. I mean, the reason that I like to ask you questions, especially questions that you don't know the answer to, is because it forces you and whomever that you're asking the question to actually consider the global impact of what it is that they're doing. So often we think of, a decision as an instance. And that would be great, like in a science experiment when you can control all the other variables. But the reality is that in the world that we live in, when we make a decision, there's a repercussion to that decision. It's either positive or negative, but we don't know what that repercussion is. But we can step back and say, okay, who does this affect? How does it affect them? How are they going to look at the decision, and where are they going to perceive? How are they going to perceive us as an organization? How are they going to perceive me as a leader? All those things are super important, and something that often new leaders, and to be honest, frankly, I wish I had somebody that encouraged me, to think about those things as I came through, because, and I think I mentioned it on Don's episode, I was a bull in the china shop. Unlike you, where you had a lot of finesse and were very intentional and didn't make a lot of rash decisions, I did. And I think part of that is I didn't have somebody going, if you unleash in this glass-filled shop, what's the outcome of that? Like, if you destroy everything of value here and then you buy it or you own it, like, there's nothing left. And so unfortunately, when I became a manager early on in my 20s, it was more about, okay, I know where I'm at and I know where I need to get to, and how fast can I get there? And as I grew up and evolved and grew as a leader, the thing that I came to realize is a lot of times it's more about the process than it is about the goal or even getting it accomplished, because you work so hard to build that culture. You work so hard to build an organization of people who have the same level of passion, even though they'll never have the same passion that you have. You hope that they have some percentage or proportion of it, and it's so easy to destroy that. And so, I just encourage people to keep that in the back of their minds as they think about, how do they next level in their leadership journey. Kory, what do you think has given you the best edge, or what do you think is the one attribute, either of your personality or your leadership style, that really has enabled you to be successful? And I know before you said that you really feel like a lot of your success has come from your culture. And I'm a firm believer in culture. And I'm also a firm believer that no matter what you want the culture to be, like, it rarely meets your expectations of that same culture. So I guess in another way to say that is, a lot of times I like to believe our culture is better than what it is. It doesn't mean that we don't keep striving for that level that we're actually shooting for. But besides that, what do you think really makes you successful as a leader? What do you think really makes you successful as a team member, as a husband, as a father, any of those types of things? Like, what do you think has really driven that success for you?
I really think that with me, what you see is what you get. I'm genuine with everything I do, whether it's at home or at work. At work, all the employees get to see me happy, mad. They get to see the full evolution of me through a day or a week or whatever. And with that, I give ownership of what's going on. I don't, ask them to do something and then pat myself on the back when it's done. I really give the ownership to the team, and that has allowed me to really excel and worry about other things, because now that our team members have ownership in it, they are taking charge. They are policing themselves. It makes my job 100% easier to the point where I can worry about other things. But I'm a very humble person. When I walk in, I don't want people to look at me. I don't want people to look at a title and expect something out of me. I want to be the guy on the corner that you feel the way you feel based on how I present myself and how I act, and not of who I am or my title in an organization. So genuine to yourself and, to your faith and your core values, and be humble with what you do. And I think people really get behind that and respect it more at a deeper level.
Awesome. So one final question here before we wrap this up, and that is, give me some idea of how you think about your role because of the time frame between now and when you retire. Because if we look back at history, and especially if we look at the Fortune 500s or bigger, we see that in a lot of instances, not in all, and I can reference probably as many against what I'm saying is what I'm saying, but a lot of CEOs historically that were polled said that, they're most effective in the first 8 years in a particular organization. But, you're a local guy, you've got local roots, local family, you're engaged in the community. So that changes how we operate, right? Because, for me, I've already been the CEO for a few years here at Vantage. I actually got the COO title in 2018, and technically I would argue that that's pretty much when my CEO reign started. So I'm 7 years into that process. I'm more than 8 years from my intended retirement date, though, that could always change at any given moment. But, you're a young guy in a booming organization that's already had significant change, since you started. And so how do you think differently because of the fact that you want to be effective for many, many years? How does that change how you manage the organization? And how does that change about, like, in your vision of a long-range plan versus, say, somebody who plans to be the CEO for about 8 years?
Yeah, that's something that I think about a lot, and it's not just as a CEO. It's also my time in the military. You get a finite amount of time in the military. I progressed very quickly through my military career, also picking up E7, right over 10 years of service, and a lot of people retire at that rank. So I had 10 more years of, okay, what am I gonna do? I take the same approach to it as I do with my position at Clearwater. The moment that I stop being effective at what I'm doing, it is time for me to start working on my exit strategy. So what I mean by that is when Clearwater stops moving forward in the direction that the board sees it, or I see it, or whoever sees it needing to go, that'll be the time that I will bow out. What that means for me, I'm not sure, but I owe it to the employees. I owe it to what I've built. I've owed it to the people before me and the people after me to leave the organization at its peak when I leave. I want to be known as the guy that came in and made that pivotal shift in the organization that put it on the trajectory of where it's going. I don't really care to be the guy that's in charge when it gets there. So I'm going to run the race with the organization as long as I feel that I'm effective in my job and we are moving towards that goal. And the moment that we're not, I'm going to readdress it and go from there.
I don't want to give people the wrong idea, but I do want you to hear what Kory just said, and that is that we hold ourselves more accountable maybe than our counterparts do. And part of being the leader of an organization is being in tune with not only our ability, but our willingness to continue to drive the passion and the engine of that organization. Now, I'll tell you, 7 years in, I just hit a 15% quarter-over-quarter growth, and that's just the beginning of the new and reinvigorated Vantage. So, I could easily, based upon the new base case that we have for Vantage, see myself being here for 8 or 10 or 15 more years potentially. But I also agree completely with what Kory said, and obviously, not being the primary owner of Vantage because we're private equity backed. Go Pharaoh's Capital, by the way. They're a great business partner for us. I do find it somewhat my own responsibility that at the time in which I don't feel like I'm effectively driving the organization forward, just as Kory just said, I would bow out also. And so I think that's important, and not so much because we call it a failure at that point, but that we get out of the way so the rest of the organization can grow and evolve kind of to that next level. And I think, in effect, we see this happen in lots of different places. I think it's important that we be aware of, both the pros and the cons of what we bring into leadership in our organizations. And my employees will tell you that I have really significant strengths in areas and I have significant weaknesses. And so as I'm able to build the team, obviously I build the team with people who can not only outpace me from knowledge and experience, but also can support my weaknesses. So, Kory, it's been great to have you here today. It's always a pleasure to have amazing leaders on this podcast. And we don't take it lightly that you guys are willing to take the time to share your experiences and your knowledge with the listeners. It's very important for them to have the opportunity, because if you think about it, we didn't have any of this information, right? When we were starting our journeys, these things existed, but never did we have something very specifically oriented towards, how do we maintain our effectiveness and how do we grow in effectiveness? And I think that's what causes me to do this every day is my desire, not only to grow as an effective leader myself, not that I'm not already effective, but to grow further in effectiveness, but also to give other people the opportunity, because as you guys have heard me say multiple times, I never had a job where I had the experience or the knowledge to do it. I always got the job first, figured out how to do it along the way. And I think you're a huge testament to that, in the sense that, what you were talking about earlier with the imposter stuff, that you really just dug in deep and said, I got to figure this stuff out, and not I've got to figure it out through other people. Like, I really have to get a grasp on my perspective of what it is that we're doing, my perspective of what's going well, and my perspective of where we go from here. And so kudos to you, Kory. Thanks for joining us on The Faithful, and I look forward to catching up soon.
Appreciate the offer and the time out of your busy day to do this.